Setting goals for 2019, how I do it and why you should too. Coming up on this special edition of The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. We're going to talk about some very important traditions that get a lot of shade thrown at them this time of year. New Year's resolutions. A lot of people say it's not worth setting goals for the new year because, people never keep them. Well, if you're not keeping your resolutions, in my opinion, that's no reason to stop setting them. It just means you need to work at finding a way to get better at keeping them. After all, getting better is kind of the whole point of goal setting. Now, I love personally the week between Christmas and New Year's. It's my time to evaluate the previous 12 months and measure myself as a human being. Am I becoming more the man I want to be, or did I just float through last year and just exist? I like to take this time to reevaluate my priorities and refocus my values and plan. Plan for how to be a better person by this time next year. Now, a lot of my goal setting comes down to rooting out passivity. If you've read my book, Making Men, you know that this is a very big part of the core precepts that define manhood. A passive man is weak, dishonorable, useless, and unable to affect the world around him in a positive way. And the opposite of passive is powerful. An engaged man will wield incredible power to help others, improve the world around him, and ultimately reflect the glory of the God who made him. So I want to be engaged in every area of life. And like I always say, what gets measured gets managed. So first, let's define 7 key areas of life that we want to measure. Those 7 areas are spiritual, relational, physical, financial, academic, business, and social. 7 key areas of your life that need to be measured and managed every year. Now, I take a few minutes and write a summary of how I feel I did at the end of the year in each of those areas. I keep a sort of journal throughout the year on a spreadsheet where I kind of track things like how many days I'm away from my home, my prayer life, what I'm reading, my workouts every day, and how much content I'm producing at work. Then I go back and look at this at the end of the year and pull out some stats of my life for the past 12 months. For example, in 2018, I was home 53% of the time, but more than that with my family, 319 days. So I felt pretty good about that. I worked out 194 days last year, and I achieved my goal of taking each of my kids along on at least one trip. I only finished reading 16 books last year, and my goal was to read at least 20, but I was able to exceed the goals I set in the area of content production for my work. So that's good. So once I've gone through those 7 areas and I've written a little summary of how I did on each one, then I start a new goal sheet and personal progress spreadsheet for the coming year. Then I try to set clear objectives for each one of those areas. For example, in the area of spiritual, I plan to finish the Old Testament. Since last year, I only managed to read the New Testament, about half of the Old. It'll probably not take me the whole year to complete that. So I'll put finish Old Testament, set new goal when reached, something like that. I'll also set a goal for my prayer life and consider how I can be more focused on gratitude in the coming year. Under relational, I'll set a couple of goals that'll hopefully help me keep from getting my priorities kind of out of whack. It'd be really easy to just travel all the time and never see my family, but especially at this stage of life when I only have a couple years left with my kids in the house, I want to make it a priority to schedule time and activities with my kids that will build those memories that last a lifetime. For example, last year I got to take my youngest, Amy, on a trip to Europe, and while it certainly wasn't cheap, I have to say that paragliding in the Swiss Alps with my sweet 15-year-old daughter made it worth every penny, every single penny. I also make a point to schedule a getaway with my wife once or twice a year. It gives us something to look forward to, and scheduling it now makes it sure that it won't get forgotten in the craziness that is our everyday life. Physical goals at this point in my life have more to do with function than form. I'm not trying to look like Adonis, I just want to make sure everything keeps working as long as possible. In my line of work, I need to be able to lift heavy bags and run for the chopper, so to speak. So I focus mostly on mobility and my large muscle groups. Now, when it comes to me personally, I've learned that what motivates me physically are tough but attainable short-term goals. General objectives like lose weight this year or something like that don't get me to the gym. So, for example, on my birthday last year, I decided to try to run 100 miles in 100 days. Now, I don't do a lot of jogging anymore, but I figured I still need to be able to run 5 miles if the need arises. And so I accomplished that goal. Wasn't shooting for the moon, but it was just an incremental improvement that would make sure I didn't get too busy to take care of my body. In the month of December, I decided to try something else. I do 1,000 reps of 6 body weight exercises like burpees and box jumps, push-ups, chin-ups, things like that. It was harder than I thought it would be, and I made it with only 1 day to spare. But that's the key. I made it. The first week of the new year, I take the U.S. Army PT test every year. 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, just to try to get a sense for where I am. Now, I also use what I'm going to eat in physical. I often don't have a lot of choice when I'm on the road, and I just have to eat whatever. But when I'm home, I try to be really regimented about my diet to keep the weight off. I also try to fast for 24 hours once a month, just as an exercise in discipline, because self-discipline is an area where if you get better in one area, it makes it easier to keep better in every area, to keep it going in every area. My financial goals, on the other hand, have changed over the years. I used to set goals on how much money I wanted to make or how much. Now what I do is how much I want to give. I try to focus on generosity, and then I find the income takes care of itself. Also in this category, it could be paying off a debt or saving for a big purchase. Under academic, you might say, well, that doesn't apply to me. I finished school a long time ago. But we should always keep learning, right? So whether it's getting better at a foreign language or reading a certain number of books or picking up a new skill, I always try to set some goals in this area. This year, I'm going to try to learn to build iPhone apps just for fun. Good for your brain, you know? Business goals, for me, take the most time. I own several companies, so I have to sit down with my managers and look at how last year ended up and talk about how to make ourselves more efficient and look for places to save money, and then set goals for production for the coming year. If you're not a business owner, you can use this section to look for ways to save money at home. You might be surprised how much money you're actually spending on things you don't use anymore, like subscriptions or insurances or whatever. And finally, social. That's not social media. Take a few minutes and think about what impact you're having on the world around you. I mean, how could you better engage with the community? How could you get involved? Keep in touch with old friends. Could you have people over for supper once a week? Something like that. Our lives are made more meaningful through the relationships we build. And so building them needs to be intentional. Now, once I've written down a couple of bullet points under each of those 7 topics, I send that document to one of my most trusted friends. And this is key. That kind of accountability is the secret to actually sticking with your goals for the new year, I think. I also save the document on my computer and then plan to look at it once a month so I don't forget what I plan to do. Also, since I'm setting a lot of short-term, like 1 to 3 month goals, looking back at my sheet throughout the year gives me a chance to see where I need to work and celebrate the small victories. So for me, that's what works. I also try to start a new personal progress spreadsheet and try to spend 1 minute every night before bed recording where I've been, what I've done, etc. Makes measuring and goal setting so much easier at the end of the year. So that's my New Year's tradition. What's yours? Wherever you are, I hope 2019 finds you healthy and engaged in purposeful work that will make the lives better of the people around you. Because that's what the Hot Zone is all about. I'm not just reporting the news. I'm going to places where people are hurting and letting you have a direct hand in making their lives better. So if you want to be a part of it, head over to patreon.com/hotzone. It's literally cheaper than a cup of coffee, $3 a month. We're kind of crowdsourcing the ability to help people. And so 2019 on the Hot Zone is going to be amazing. So I hope you'll be there. I'm Chuck Holton, and thanks for being a part of the Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.